In front of my entire family during Thanksgiving dinner, she boldly labeled me as nothing more than a glorified babysitter, a remark loud enough for everyone present to hear clearly. My wife, Rhonda, was expected to intervene or correct her daughter in that moment, but instead, she invalidated our relationship by saying, "She's not your daughter, Douglas, don't correct her." Before I share the rest of this story with you, I want you to comprehend something. I'm a man who rarely loses control. 3 decades in the military and 10 years running a private security consulting firm in Roanoke, Virginia, have instilled in me the importance of controlling my reactions. They taught me that acting impulsively is the most perilous action one can take during tense situations. So I smiled, picked up my glass of water, sipped, and smiled at Kiara, her latest comment sounding like the most captivating thing heard all day. As others pondered over the significance of the smile, I was already anticipating the upcoming events. Name is Douglas Mercer, aged 53. Spent 3 decades serving my country, traversing locations rarely spotted on maps, returned home intact, and established something tangible with my labor. Run a private security consultancy catering to corporate clients in the Mid-Atlantic area. Reside in Roanoke, Virginia, within 3 blocks of where I was raised. I'm not a complex individual. Value diligence, loyalty, and honoring commitments. Or at least, I used to believe that these principles were shared by others. Encountered Rhonda at a charitable event for families of veterans in Richmond approximately 2.5 years ago. 47-year-old woman worked as a hospital administrator, exuding an immediate impression of confidence and articulateness, characteristic of someone who knows her desires and isn't afraid to express them. She had a daughter, Kiara, then 20, studying business at a university in Northern Virginia. Rhonda had single-handedly raised Kiara following the end of her first marriage when Kiara was 8 years old, which I admired. When Rhonda and I began our serious relationship, I acknowledged that she came with a daughter as part of the deal since I didn't have children of my own. My previous marriage ended before we had any kids, and fatherhood never transpired amidst military deployments and business construction. What I hadn't grasped yet was that Rhonda's bond with Kiara left no space for anyone else. Kiara took precedence wasn't just a priority. It served as the guiding principle for every decision Rhonda made, and I was about to discover the consequences of disregarding that rule. 11 months ago, we had a small wedding in Charlottesville with the Blue Ridge Mountains as our backdrop during mid-October when leaves were turning. My brother Wesley and his wife traveled from Pennsylvania. My mother flew in from Florida, while Kiara stood throughout the ceremony with crossed arms and an uninvited meeting-like expression. I acknowledged her presence, but attributed it to nerves, change, or a young woman watching her mother marry someone new. I chose to give her the benefit of the doubt, which was my initial mistake. The understanding was for Kiara to continue residing in the apartment near campus that Rhonda had been paying for, with full tuition and monthly expenses covered, as well as a car that Rhonda was still paying off. I kept silent, seeing Kiara as Rhonda's daughter and considering it her responsibility. I didn't feel compelled to take on the role of a father figure to a grown woman who hadn't sought my involvement. In an attempt to establish a connection, I endeavored to cultivate a relationship with Kiara, not out of a desire for her affection like a father, but due to my marital bond with her mother, which made such actions seem fitting. Initially, Kiara exhibited frosty behavior towards me, maintaining politeness while remaining aloof. She'd attend dinners, answer questions briefly, and depart as quickly as possible. Rhonda refrained from prompting her daughter, avoiding expressions like, "He's a good man." "Give him a chance for my sake." Nevertheless, I persisted in making appearances. When Kiara experienced a tire blowout on I-81 during an icy winter storm at night, I braved the cold hours to wait with her until a tow truck arrived. During finals week, when she mentioned her laptop was malfunctioning, I ventured to Best Buy early the following day and procured a new one, leaving it at her apartment without ceremony. When she required a work reference for a summer internship but lacked professional connections, I wrote one on company letterhead that likely contributed to her securing the role. However, she never expressed gratitude in a way that suggested she recognized its value or cost. As Rhonda would say, "That was so kind, Douglas, but she didn't push her daughter to acknowledge it. I let it go. You adapt. You decide what battles are worth fighting." The Thanksgiving dinner then took place. If you're viewing this and have dealt with a combined family or know the challenge of loving people who haven't decided to accept you, I encourage you to subscribe and comment below before proceeding. Share your thoughts on how you would have handled my situation, because the story is only getting started. What followed was something I'm still struggling to understand even now. If you appreciated this video, it might resonate if you've ever felt like smiling despite your true desire being otherwise. My house in Roanoke hosted Thanksgiving. My mother, Beverly, aged 76, had traveled from Sarasota to join us for the occasion. My brother Wesley and his wife Patricia drove down from Pittsburgh. I yearned for a successful gathering. I labored over preparations for 2 days. I smoked a turkey using a technique taught by a staff sergeant in North Carolina that requires time and results in an exceptional bird. I prepared my mother's cornbread dressing, following a recipe she had written for me on a note card in 1998. Rhonda contributed sweet potato pie and a green bean casserole. Wesley brought an ample supply of wine, enough to overpower a small army. Kiara arrived at 3 in the afternoon, 90 minutes before dinner, appearing reluctant. Kiara was neatly attired, nothing inappropriate, but her subdued demeanor upon entering was characteristic, suggesting an obligatory visit. My mother warmly welcomed Beverly Mercer, a 76-year-old woman with a southern twang and a comforting disposition, reminiscent of a cozy blanket. Beverly embraced Kiara and inquired about her school life, internship, and studies. Kiara responded politely yet briefly, offering the same terse answers as usual, the bare minimum of courtesy. We gathered for dinner around 4:30. The table was set elegantly with candles lit, evoking a picture-perfect portrayal of family life. My mother recited grace. Wesley poured wine. Patricia shared an anecdote about their journey through the Shenandoah Valley and how breathtaking the autumn hues were. Inquired about Kiara's final exam preparations, as I knew she had 2 challenging tests approaching in the first week of December. Given our past connection where I had introduced her to a university professor in D.C. who had consented to assist her with tutoring sessions via video call, this arrangement was set up without any fanfare. Kiara displayed an expression towards me, which I hadn't seen directed solely at me before. It was disdain, evident and unconcealed. "Everything is fine," she responded. "After all, you wouldn't comprehend such subjects. You are a security consultant, not an academic." A brief moment of silence ensued. My mother's hand hovered over the cornbread dressing. Wesley cast a glance at Patricia. I maintained a calm tone in my voice. "You're correct that our backgrounds differ significantly. However..." Kiara casually leaned in her chair, implying she was there for a lengthy stay. Inquiring about everyone's well-being, she commented on my non-family ties, labeling me as essentially a highly praised babysitter who filled out some paperwork instead of a family member. A hush fell over the room, with Wesley setting down his fork and Mother staring at Kiara in 76 years' worth of astonishment. Patricia remained quiet, focusing on her meal, while I glanced at Rhonda. Her expression was ambiguous, yet suggested she perceived Kiara had overstepped boundaries. Before further words could be spoken, Rhonda addressed me instead. "Kiara isn't your daughter, Douglas," she whispered gently. "Don't contradict her." With those words, the subtle hint of awareness vanished. Rhonda resumed eating, resuming her meal. In just about 3 seconds, I found myself seated, and to an outsider, it appeared a 53-year-old man casually lifted his glass, took a sip, and smiled. However, beneath the surface, things were far from ordinary. Over 3 decades of military training instilled a skill in me to detach feelings from choices. I experienced them both, but never allowed them to clash publicly. A choice was already taking shape, as clear as a mission directive. I flashed smiles at Kiara and Rhonda. I glanced at my mother, whose eyes mirrored the sorrow that comes from witnessing a loved one being belittled by someone who should have shielded them. And in the calmest voice I could muster, I suggested to Beverly, "Beverly, share with Wesley about that Savannah trip you made last spring, the one with the ghost tour." And so we continued. Thankfully, my mother obliged, shifting the conversation to Savannah. Wesley joined in. Patricia did too. We completed our dinner, indulged in dessert. Kiara finished her meal swiftly, departing soon after, explaining she needed to return to university. Rhonda accompanied her to the entrance. I cleared the table post-haste. Once Kiara was gone, no one brought up the past events. Wesley cast me a prolonged glance when Rhonda ventured into the kitchen, a look heavy with 35 years of brotherly comprehension. In response, I subtly nodded, conveying, "I understand. I'm okay. Let it be." My mother hugged me goodnight, holding on for a few extra moments. Rhonda and I retired to bed without addressing the matter. She drifted off to sleep. I spent the night in darkness, contemplating the ceiling of my own home in a city of my youth, pondering over what had transpired and what was yet to come. The smile was not an expression of forgiveness, but rather a plan. By dawn, I had a clear vision for the subsequent 24 hours. The earliest phone call was made at 7:15 a.m., with Rhonda still asleep. called my longtime business contract collaborator, Garrett, discussed financial issues related to our prenuptial agreement, a necessity for me due to preventive reasons, not suspicion. The prenup detailed my assets were safeguarded. Any additional funds I chose to aid Chiara were at my discretion. Garrett reaffirmed this within 20 minutes. Next, phoned the university's billing office. Chiara's tuition was intricate. Rhonda covered most of it, but 4 months into our union, I had electively joined the account and paid a considerable share of the semester installments because Rhonda faced unanticipated expenditures in her budget, and I wished to assist. There were no legal obligations involved. There was no formal contract. It was a case of a husband assisting his wife financially, driven by kindness. I silently revoked my authorization from the account, making it effective straight away. Subsequently, I contacted the dealership responsible for financing Chiara's car. A few months into our marriage, when Chiara's vehicle required extensive repairs and Rhonda was contemplating whether to repair or replace it, I had endorsed a new lease agreement to help Rhonda obtain favorable terms. My name was listed on that contract. I called to explore my options as a co-signer. They clearly explained the possibilities. By that morning, I hadn't taken any irreversible steps. I gathered data. I asked questions. I prepared myself. I am not a man who acts impulsively. I am a man who takes calculated actions. By 8:3, Rhonda had woken up, brewing coffee in the kitchen. I descended the stairs, and she turned around with a smile, as if it was an ordinary morning following an uneventful Thanksgiving. I made myself a cup of coffee and took a seat at the kitchen island, ready to discuss yesterday's dinner incident. "Douglas, Chiara is merely readjusting," you said, your smile softening slightly. "She's going through a challenging phase, and the transition has been tough for her. She didn't intend any serious harm with what she said." I met your gaze. At your own dinner table in front of my mother, brother, and his wife, she referred to me as a glorified babysitter. At 21, Chiara is still navigating family dynamics. You know how unpredictable young adults can be. I understand that too, Rhonda. However, I also know the appropriate reaction for a mother when her adult child publicly disrespects her husband at the dinner table. Your smile faded. "You were reminded of this at the table. She's not your daughter. You don't discipline her." "I wasn't trying to discipline her. I was attempting to address her respectfully." "You silenced me in front of my family." You placed your mug on the counter. "I won't allow you to stir up trouble with my daughter." I pledged to her before our marriage that things would remain constant between us, as she is my top concern. She will forever be my primary concern. This was brought to mind when recalling the tire blowout on I-81 at 11 p.m. during a winter ice storm, and other instances such as the laptop, letter of recommendation, tutoring, Cosend lease, tuition contributions, all given willingly since I perceived them as investments for our family. "I acknowledge she's your priority," I stated. "I need to grasp where I stand in this hierarchy." "You are my husband. That's distinct," she replied. However, considering the incident last night when Chiara spoke to me at our own table, it appeared you were giving her free rein while instructing me to step back. Hearing your response labeled as overreacting was the term that solidified everything for me. After driving 4 hours from Pittsburgh, my brother and his spouse joined us at a table I had prepared. The 21-year-old disrespected me by calling me a babysitter in front of everyone, and my wife believed I was overreacting to this remark. Finishing my coffee, I announced I needed to work for a few hours at the office, as there were tasks that required my attention. The subsequent 48 hours passed swiftly. I feel it's important to clarify. I didn't act as I did next out of retaliation, but because I had invested 11 months in this family with patience and honesty, only to receive a sign that the nature of our relationship was not what I had thought. If a business deal is falsely presented, it's renegotiated. When those you have invested in reveal your investment's worthlessness, you divert it. I ceased my monetary donations for Chiara's tuition. I set the ball rolling to cancel my co-signing on the lease agreement. I redirected the funds earmarked for Chiara's living expenses into my personal accounts, and then I waited. Rhonda phoned me at 2 p.m. the day after Thanksgiving, while I was in my office on Campbell Avenue reviewing client reports. I picked up after the second ring. Her voice, usually composed as a hospital administrator overseeing numerous employees, was strained and slightly trembling. "I received a notice from the university," she said. "Yes." "And from the dealership?" "Yes." "What did you do, Douglas?" I replied. "I stopped my informal financial aid, the donations I'd been making willingly." "You can't do that." "I can." I double-checked with Garrett. "You're acting within your rights on everything." The pause on the line carried a familiar tone from years of tough talks. It was the pause of someone reevaluating. She's at risk of losing her housing placement if tuition isn't paid by December 1st, and she needs that car for commuting to her internship, which is 40 minutes each way. I acknowledge the consequences, I replied. I weighed it all before making the calls. So this is retribution. You're penalizing my daughter because she spoke impulsively during dinner. I gave a moment of pause before responding. Rhonda, think about what you've just said. You stated she spoke impulsively. Yesterday you told me I was overreacting. You advised me not to discipline her because she's not your child. I'm asking you to maintain a consistent stance since those three statements can't all be accurate at the same time. Another pause. What do you want, Douglas? Her voice was softer now. I need you to grasp the nature of our situation, I expressed. Over the past year, I've been providing financial, emotional, and practical support for your daughter, not out of obligation, but as an attempt to be a supportive partner for you and a positive influence in her life. When she spoke disrespectfully at that table, and you chose not to address it but instead supported her, I interpreted this as a message. What was the message? That my goodwill is worthless here, that it can be used up without recognition or return, that your daughter can behave towards me however she pleases, and you will expect me to accept it. The longest silence ensued. When Rhonda spoke again, her voice had transformed. Gone was the trembling, in its place was something harder. I will not let you manipulate my bond with my daughter through monetary means. I'm not exerting control, I stated. I'm withdrawing something I was offering voluntarily. I can do that. You're doing it to punish her. I'm doing it because I am reconsidering what I am prepared to provide in a household where I feel treated as non-essential. Her breath released audibly. I need space to sort out the finances. That makes sense, and I want you to understand that Kiara will not offer an apology to you. After a moment of reflection, I acknowledged this point. Now both parties have precise information about our respective positions. For now, I wish to pause as I am aware that there are spectators who believe I've overstepped, that withholding financial support from a 21-year-old college student, irrespective of what she said, is excessive. I have weighed this critique. I have pondered it deeply. And I find myself continually returning to this thought. My actions are a reflection of how I value the relationship that I have with my daughter and the household environment that I am part of. For nearly a year, I diligently, selflessly, and generously crafted a life with this woman and showed compassion towards her child. This wasn't due to coercion or obligation. It was just reflective of who I am as a man. However, in one candid conversation, the truth about my efforts was brutally exposed. Kiara labeled me as a mere babysitter, while Rhonda instructed me to retreat. In the following morning, Rhonda deemed my reaction excessive and labeled my actions thoughtless. Yet I wasn't punishing Kiara. Instead, I was responding to a question she had been indirectly asking for 11 months. She sought to understand if I was indispensable. I was providing an answer. The subsequent weeks were challenging, as any marriage under subtle tension tends to be. Rhonda and I remained in the same household, ostensibly functioning as a team, but there was a palpable shift. She was grappling with the financial restructuring concerning Kiara's tuition and car expenses. She accomplished it, and I wish to acknowledge her for this. Notably, she renegotiated the lease under her sole name, covered the remaining tuition costs, and shouldered the burden of these expenses. This was a substantial financial sacrifice on her part. What she failed to do, however, was to engage Rhonda and me in a genuine conversation about the incident and its implications. It wasn't until the night she visited my home office and closed the door that we had our talk. I glanced up from my desk as she sat down opposite me in the client chair. The lamplight from the credenza created a soft, warm glow in the room. We stared at each other for a moment, a frankness emerging from our shared exhaustion of pretense. I mishandled the situation at the table, Rhonda admitted. I didn't speak up. I waited. She was rude. I should have spoken up, but instead I made it worse. She hesitated. I struggle with criticism. I know that about myself. For 21 years I ensured her well-being, yet I seem to have lost the knack for asserting myself against her. I acknowledged prior to our marriage that this was a trait of yours, but it's not an excuse. No, I confirmed, it's not. She glanced at her hands. The money, Douglas, when you removed all of it. Chiara contacted me in tears, fearing she would have to drop out. I understand, that was a tough moment for me too. She looked up. Was that your intention, to frighten her? I pondered over how to respond truthfully. My objective wasn't to scare her, but to make both of you comprehend the significance of my contributions. When they are treated as trivial and expected, there are repercussions. I'm not a device, Rhonda. I'm not background infrastructure. I'm an individual who chose to invest in this family. After a lengthy silence, Rhonda spoke cautiously. Chiara is willing to speak with you. She contacted me this afternoon. She expressed her intention to apologize, which took me by surprise. However, I didn't let it show. Was there a reason she mentioned this? She stated my mother contacted her. This almost prompted a smile. The thought of Beverly Mercer, aged 76, speaking with a 21-year-old for a private discussion was intriguing. I could merely speculate about their conversation's content. My mother has the ability to clarify matters without raising her voice. What did my mother discuss with her? Rhonda offered a subtle smile. It seemed she mentioned how I had taught my son to support others, and it was unfortunate that not everyone learned to recognize such gestures. This information needed some processing. I'll speak with her, I replied. Thank you, but Rhonda, please listen carefully. The issue isn't merely Chiara being rude. The concern is the effort I have put into this family for nearly a year. Financially, practically, every time that car broke down on the highway, every recommendation letter, every connection I made for her. In that instance at the table, your reaction validated my long-held suspicions. My efforts were appreciated but not truly valued. It seemed I could always give my all, yet whenever I raised concerns, I became the issue instead. Rhonda's eyes gleamed with a secret, and finally she admitted, "Yes, I acknowledge that dynamic has developed. I'm unsure how to rectify it swiftly." I responded, "I'm not asking for immediate change, I'm asking for honesty." Chiara visited our house on a chilly December Sunday. She took her seat at the kitchen table where Thanksgiving dinner had been served. Her countenance was free of contempt, revealing only a 21-year-old trying to articulate a wrong she knew she had committed. She didn't prepare a lengthy speech. Instead, she acknowledged that she had been taking out her frustrations with her life and her mother's marriage on me, even before there was justification for doing so. She acknowledged I didn't deserve the words she spoke during Thanksgiving. She apologized. For a moment, I scrutinized her. "I acknowledge your apology," I replied. "There's something else I need to share with you honestly. I never aimed to replace your father or assume a parental role. I wanted to be a decent person whom your mother chose to be with. That was all. Being decent doesn't mean being unseen. What you said at that table was intended to make me feel insignificant." She nodded solemnly. "I understand. We need to establish something different," I asserted. "Not a forced relationship or pretend family gatherings, just basic respect. That's the minimum." "Yes," she agreed. "I can offer that." The scene didn't resemble a movie climax with no emotional breakthrough or tearful reconciliation. She finished her coffee, conversed with her mother in another room for a while, and departed. However, there was a subtle change in the house's atmosphere. Current situation needs to be shared since this isn't a tale with a tidy conclusion. Rhonda and I remain married, engaging in couples therapy at the suggestion I initiated and which she accepted. Our downtown Roanoke therapist has been effective in facilitating discussions where difficult truths can be voiced. Progress continues to be made. Chiara is still pursuing her education. Financial management for Chiara now falls entirely on Rhonda, as I have chosen to disengage financially from her life, not as retribution but for clarity. The boundary is clear-cut. If our relationship with Chiara evolves into something genuine in the future, that may alter matters. However, I am no longer taking financial risks before the relationship matures. Recently, my mother sent me a card in December containing 3 messages. "You demonstrated more grace than most men could. Your father would have been proud. I love you." I've kept this card in my desk drawer. Wesley contacted me a few weeks after Thanksgiving. He expressed, "I've been wrestling with how to express this, so I'll just say it. I've never felt more proud of your actions than at that table, and I've witnessed you in real-life crisis situations." What they don't warn you about such moments is that the toughest part isn't the confrontation itself. It's the silent aftermath, where you grapple with whether what transpired can transform into what you envisioned. I don't have a straightforward resolution yet. Over the course of 31 years, I've learned that some things take longer to construct than anticipated, and abandoning a project before its completion is its own form of defeat. Therefore, I haven't thrown in the towel, but I am now on different terrain, a place where I understand the burden I bear, a place where no one can label that burden as unnecessary without facing repercussions. The day after Thanksgiving, when I made those calls, I wasn't dismantling anything. I was responding to a question. Was your query, "Have you any idea about this?" At the dining table, the response was negative, thus I ensured they discovered the truth.